Absolutely, he could be a top 20 quarterback in this league.
Hey, I know you've been watching Browns media. You've been watching them tear down Shedeur. I get it, man. It's tough. I'm tired of it too. So I thought, how about we peel the curtain back, get some positivity. We're going to hear from teammates of Shedeur. We're going to hear from NFL legends. We're going to hear from WWE legends, Cleveland legends. And they all want Shedeur to be that guy. And then we're going to get into some tape because the tape don't lie. The eye in the sky don't lie. And rather, if the nerd stats are telling you a lie, and the nerd stats aren't pretty.
Everyone said Shedeur Sanders would fail in the NFL. They said he was just Deshaun's son, riding his father's name. They said Colorado wasn't real football. They said he couldn't read defenses, couldn't handle pressure, couldn't lead a locker room. And then he walked into Cleveland, one of the most brutal football cities in America, and quietly started proving every single one of them wrong. This is the story Browns media doesn't want you to see.
You seen person, like in him that made you be like, you know what? I think he's a quarterback for the future. I think this is the guy.
Yeah. If you know me, bro, I feel like I'm a quarterback analyst, bro. That's the only thing I do is watch.
As a pro, that's your job. You feel me? You break
I just
down.
enjoy watching quarterbacks, like good quarterbacks. So I used to, before I even knew Shedeur or before he was my teammate, I used to watch. That's the only team I watched was Colorado because I felt like they had the most exciting games for real.
Facts.
So I already.
Let's be honest about something first. The narrative around Shedeur Sanders was poisoned before he ever took a single snap in the NFL. The moment Deshaun Sanders became his coach at Jackson State, the critics had their story ready. He only succeeds because his dad clears the path. When Colorado started winning games and drawing massive ratings, the story shifted. Those aren't real opponents. When Shedeur got drafted by the Browns, the story shifted again. He's walking into a disaster franchise with nothing to prove himself with. There was always going to be a reason to doubt him. Always. And that pattern right there, that constant moving of the goalposts, tells you more about the critics than it does about Shedeur Sanders. Now, before we get into the real stuff, let's talk about what actually happened in his rookie season, because a lot of people are running around with a very selective memory. Yes, the interceptions were there. Yes, the touchdown-to-interception ratio was not pretty. Nobody is here to pretend the stat sheet looked clean, because it didn't. But here is where the conversation has to get honest. Shedeur Sanders was the most blitzed rookie quarterback in the entire NFL last season.
And Shedeur at Colorado, those are some of the most exciting games of college football, period. If you actually like football and you enjoy watching high-stakes football, exciting football, you're lying to me if you say you didn't stay up to 3 a.m., 2 a.m., 1 a.m., whatever time it was to watch Shedeur in Colorado battle it out, have elite games, the Kansas game, the K-State game, even though they lost that game was phenomenal. Like if you enjoy football, when we get into these clowns in the Cleveland media talking about Shedeur fans aren't
not one of the most blitzed, the most blitzed. Defenses looked at him and decided the best game plan was to send everybody and make him uncomfortable every single play. And on top of that, he was doing it behind one of the most notoriously weak offensive lines in the league. We are talking about a situation where other quarterbacks, veterans with years of experience, had already been broken by that same environment. Deshaun Watson, a former Super Bowl contender, came to Cleveland and got absolutely dismantled by the combination of injuries and that offensive line. But somehow, Shedeur Sanders, a rookie, was supposed to walk in and put up elite numbers behind that same wall of failure? The criticism was never fair, it was never balanced, and the people pushing it knew exactly what they were doing. This is where the tape becomes the most important thing in this entire conversation, because the tape does not lie. The eye in the sky does not lie. And when you actually sit down and watch what Shedeur Sanders was doing on that field, a completely different story emerges from the one Browns media was selling you every single week. Take the Ravens game. This is one of the games critics love to bring up. Yes, there was an interception early. Yes, it was a rough start. But let's talk about what happened after that, because that is where character is revealed. 3rd and 5, Browns are in striking distance, and Baltimore decides to show Shedeur a 6-man pressure look, 6 defenders threatening to come.
The ball placement. It is 3rd and 5, right? He's standing in a pocket. He's getting a 5-man rush with a twist. So let's really break this down, because if we gonna get positive, let's get really positive here. I want to talk about this, because this is the reason why a man who y'all want to talk about has more interceptions than touchdown. This is why he's ahead of Dylan Gabriel in the quarterback competition. This right here.
They run a stunt on the line specifically because Cleveland's offensive line was notoriously bad at picking up stunts, and Baltimore knew it. They add a late corner blitz on top of that. The pocket collapses almost immediately. A lesser quarterback, a quarterback who is mentally fragile, folds in that moment. Shedeur steps up into the pocket, feels the pressure, processes his reads under fire, and delivers a throw that required real trust in his receiver. The receiver didn't come through on that play. The pass fell incomplete. But when you watch the ball placement, when you watch the decision-making, when you watch a guy calmly operate inside a collapsing structure with defenders in his face, that is not what a quarterback who can't handle pressure looks like. That is actually the opposite of what Brown's media was telling you. Then, there is the Bengals game. Critics called it one of his worst performances of the season, and sure, on the surface, the numbers weren't great, but watch the film from that game, and something fascinating happens. The Browns were starting multiple drives from inside their own 5-yard line. Shedeur was literally taking snaps from the 7-yard line and catching the shotgun snap at the 3-yard line. His entire operating room was basically his own end zone, and yet, with a 5-man rush bearing down on him with almost zero space to work with, he goes through his progression, moves within the pocket, avoids what should have been a certain sack, and gets the ball out for a positive gain. The guys who spent all week on YouTube and Twitter saying he only drifts in the pocket, saying he takes unnecessary sacks, saying he can't process defenses, what exactly were they watching? Because the film shows a quarterback who was getting through reads, surviving pressure, and making something out of nothing in situations where most players would have simply gone down.
At some point, not look as great all the time. Watch Shedeur work this pocket, though. Again, they say the Bengals game is one of his worst. He gets 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, 5-man rush, right? He steps up in a very eeky, creaky pocket. Y'all sat there and said he drifts in the pocket. Y'all said he takes unnecessary sacks. They started how many drives against the Bengals in their own 5-yard line?
The Bills game adds another layer to this. Joey Bosa coming off one edge, Rousseau absolutely destroying the left tackle on the other side. The pocket doesn't just collapse, it evaporates. In that kind of situation, you have maybe 1.5 seconds before you are on the ground. Shedeur Sanders gets the ball out on time, puts it in the right place, and delivers a tight velocity throw to Harold Fain Jr. while simultaneously absorbing a hit. That is arm talent. That is toughness. That is the kind of play that doesn't show up clean in the box score, but that every serious football person notices when they watch the film. Now let's talk about something that the analytics crowd loves to use against him. The EPA numbers, the completion percentage, the passer rating. None of these metrics were kind to Shedeur last season. And here is the thing about that. Those numbers are real, they are not fake, but context is everything in football, and the context around those numbers fundamentally changes what they mean. When you are the most blitzed quarterback in the league, your completion percentage is going to suffer because blitzes create coverage disguises that force quicker, harder throws. When your receivers are dropping catchable balls, and they were dropping them consistently, your completion numbers take a hit that has nothing to do with your accuracy. When you are starting drives from your own end zone repeatedly, your EPA is going to look negative because the field position math is working completely against you before you even throw a pass. The numbers tell a story, but they don't tell the whole story. And the people who are presenting those numbers as the complete truth about Shedeur Sanders were being deliberately misleading.
Here is an analyst named Tyus who made a point that cuts right to the heart of what Shedeur's game actually is. He said Shedeur is the kind of quarterback who skips the layup to go for the great play, and that is genuinely true. You watch Shedeur operate, and there are moments where the safe, simple check-down throw is right there, and he bypasses it because he sees something bigger developing downfield. Sometimes that leads to incompletions, sometimes it leads to turnovers, but that exact same same instinct, that willingness to trust his arm and trust his receiver and go for the play that breaks a game open is also what makes him electric to watch. The question for 2026 is not whether that instinct needs to be dialed back a little. It absolutely does. The question is whether the pieces around him are now good enough that when he does go for those big plays, his receivers are actually going to come through. And that is where this offseason becomes genuinely exciting. The Browns have reportedly spent close to $100 million rebuilding that offensive line. George Warhop, one of the most respected offensive line coaches in the entire NFL, is now in charge of developing those guys. Jerry Jeudy is back with a full offseason to build real chemistry with Shedeur. Denzel Boston was brought in specifically to be a red zone weapon and a contested catch threat. Casey Conception, Isaiah Bond, the receiving room has real depth now in a way it simply did not have last season. If these pieces perform anywhere close to their potential, the entire calculus around Shedeur Sanders changes dramatically. The guy who was surviving impossible situations last year gets to actually play football in 2026. That is a genuinely different proposition.
And then there's the leadership dimension of this story, which is the part that Browns media has been most aggressively ignoring. Trey Avery, a quarterback himself, a guy who gets paid to play in the NFL, said something that should have been a much bigger story than it was. He said before Shedeur was even his teammate, before he even knew him personally, he used to watch Colorado games specifically because of Shedeur. He said Colorado had the most exciting games in college football, and that Shedeur was clearly that guy at quarterback. When a professional quarterback, someone whose entire career revolves around understanding the position, looks at another quarterback and says that means something real. That is not a fan talking. That is a professional evaluation from someone inside the building. The locker room situation in Cleveland is something that deserves its own conversation. This is a franchise that has been through absolute chaos for years. Quarterback after quarterback has come through and either failed, gotten injured, or simply never connected with the city. The Cleveland fan base is one of the most passionate and most bruised in professional sports. They have been promised franchise quarterbacks before and had those promises turned to dust. For a new quarterback to walk into that environment and genuinely earn the respect of his teammates, not because of his last name, not because of his father's fame, but because of how he carries himself and how he plays, that is significant. And by all accounts, from inside that building, that is exactly what Shedeur has done.
The community piece of this story is the one that makes the criticism feel most hollow. When a low-income Cleveland neighborhood had a building fire and families lost everything, Shedeur Sanders showed up. Not with a camera crew, not with a publicist setting up the perfect Instagram moment. He just showed up and helped. Other people's cameras captured it. The news covered it. But the Browns media machine, the same machine that spends hours every week picking apart his completion percentage and his footwork in the pocket, somehow never found time to talk about that. He bought a house in Cleveland. He got robbed in Cleveland and stayed in Cleveland. He was giving back to local high schools when he was 4th on the depth chart and had no guarantee of ever seeing the field. The Miz, a WWE legend who grew up in Cleveland and bleeds for that city, looked at Shedeur Sanders and said he has taken Cleveland as his community. When a Cleveland native says that about you, that means you are doing something right that goes beyond football. So where does this all leave us heading into 2026? Here is the honest assessment. Shedeur Sanders is not a finished product. He is a second-year quarterback who had a genuinely difficult rookie season in genuinely brutal circumstances. The turnovers need to come down. The decision-making in certain situations needs to sharpen. There are moments where he needs to take the layup instead of forcing the great play. All of that is real and fair, but the foundation is there. The arm talent is real. The pocket awareness, despite what you have been told, is actually pretty good when you watch the film. The toughness is absolutely undeniable. And the intangibles, the leadership, the love for the city, the competitive fire, those things are not coachable. You either have them or you don't. Shedeur Sanders has them. The question for 2026 is not whether Shedeur Sanders can be good. The question is whether Cleveland is finally going to give him what he needs to show everyone what good actually looks like with him under center. Better line, better weapons, a full off season of chemistry building, a coaching staff that believes in him.
All of those things are now in place in a way they were not last season. And if this offense clicks the way the pieces suggest it can, the conversation around Shedeur Sanders is going to change very fast. The people who spent all of last season tearing him down are going to have to find something new to talk about, because the tape was always telling a different story, and in 2026, the stats are going to start telling that same story too. If you think Shedeur Sanders proves everyone wrong this season, drop a comment below. If you think the critics are right and he never puts it together, say that too, because that debate is exactly what makes this the most interesting quarterback story in the NFL right now. Like the video if this breakdown changed how you see him even a little. Subscribe because this Brown season is going to be must-watch television, and we are going to be here for every single moment of it.